In 2 Samuel 21:19, we have this interesting phrase that Elhanan killed Goliath. I thought we all knew that David killed Goliath, but right here in our Bibles, we have this statement that Elhanan killed Goliath. Now, a few months ago, Pete posted a video about two different creation stories, 1:1 to 2:4a and 2:4b to the end of chapter 3. It sounds as if when we get to the end of verse 4 of chapter 2 that we're starting over. There's a new creation account. And this is because there are different traditions that are placed side by side in our Bibles. I wanted to give you another example of this when we ask the question, who killed Goliath? So in 1 Samuel 17, we have the classic traditional telling of the story of David and Goliath, right? David slays Goliath. But in 2 Samuel 21:19, in this list of David's mighty men and their accomplishments, we have this phrase that Goliath is killed by Elhanan. Not only that, but we have the same description of the spear. Now, whenever you think that there may be some tension in the traditions we find in Samuel Kings, always go to Chronicles, because the chronicler likes to try to smooth these differences over. The chronicler writing much later than Samuel Kings. And we have in 1 Chronicles 20 verse 5 this smoothing over where the writer suggests that maybe it was Lami, the brother of Goliath, that Elhanan has killed. That takes care, again, of the tension we find in 1 Samuel 17 and 2 Samuel 21:19. However, it's much easier to explain it by just saying that there's these different traditions. In fact, maybe there's a little bit of propaganda where David takes credit for Elhanan's achievements, which wouldn't have been unheard of or absurd in the ancient world. It would have been probably quite common. Another example of this, real quick, is read 1 Samuel chapter 16 and 1 Samuel chapter 17 and see if you don't get the same feeling you get when you read chapters 1:1 to 2:4a of Genesis and 2:4b to the end of chapter 3. It sounds like we're starting over. There's some redundancy in here. So in 1 Samuel 16, we have Saul being introduced to David as someone who can play a musical instrument to calm Saul down because there is a spirit that's troubling him. He's on pretty intimate terms with the king. And then we end that chapter with David becoming Saul's armor bearer. But then in chapter 17, there is a battle going on, and the king's armor bearer is nowhere to be found. He's at home. And now that doesn't seem to be a big deal because he goes, the Bible says, between home and spending time with David. But what's really challenging to understand then is in chapter 17, verse 55, Saul asks who it is that killed Goliath. Who is this? And Abner says, I have no idea. So they don't know who David is. And we find an episode where David is introduced, seemingly for the first time, to King Saul and to Abner, his highest-ranking official. So it's really hard to imagine that Saul wouldn't know who David was if he had been on these intimate terms before, had been his armor bearer. Also likely that Abner would have known. So what accounts for this? Now, again, there's all kinds of explanations if you need it. There are, some people want to attribute it to scribal error and these other things, but the easiest thing to recognize is that throughout our Bible, we have these tensions of tradition. And you know what? It's a wonderful and beautiful thing that invites us now into the conversation rather than assuming that we have this harmonious, univocal, or one-voice account. We have these testimonies and we have these counter-testimonies, and it invites us into a conversation, into a debate, into the struggle, rather than something we just have to adhere to blindly. So it's something I've come to appreciate within these different traditions, and hopefully you can too. Until next time.